Good day, everyone. I am Matthew Luke Balucas, and today we're going to talk about culture, the meaning, characteristics, and function of culture. So, culture can be defined as all the ways of life, including arts, beliefs, and institutions of a population that are passed down from generation to generation. Culture has been called the way of life for an entire society. As such, it includes codes of manners, dress, language, religion, rituals, and art. Here are an example of the cultures found here in the Philippines. So you can see here Sinulog, which is celebrated January here in Cebu and also other parts of the Philippines. Uh, it is the feast of the Senior Santo Niño. Next here we have is this gathering of family members, relatives, and also neighbors, which is a very part of the culture of a Filipino. And next we have here is the harana, in which young men are sing in order to court, while courting the young maiden in order to gain her interest. Philippines has a variety of cultures, which is very obvious and very observable indeed. So, what really is culture, or the meaning? What is the meaning of culture? Culture, sometimes an individual is described as a highly cultured person. So culture in this sense refers to certain personal characteristics of an individual. It also refers to the sum of human beings' life ways, their behavior, beliefs, feelings, thought, and it connotes everything that is acquired by them as social beings. There are different people who define culture and give its meaning. So here are some examples of those people. Edward Tyler defined culture as that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. Whereas Sutherland and Woodward said, if culture exists only where there is communication, then the content of culture can be ideas or symbol patterns. Culture is then an immaterial phenomenon only, a matter of thoughts and meanings and habits, and not of visible, untouchable material things or objects. Cooley, Argel, and Carr said, the entire accumulation of artificial objects, conditions, tools, techniques, ideas, symbols, and behavior patterns peculiar to a group of people, possessing a certain consistency of its own, and capable of transmission from one generation to another. MacLever also stated that culture is the expression of our nature in our modes of living and our thinking, intercourse in our literature, in religion, in recreation, and enjoyment. According to E.A. Hobel, culture is the sum total of integrated learned behavior patterns which are characteristics of the members of a society and which are therefore not the result of biological inheritance. Bierstedt stated that culture is the complex whole that consists of everything we think and do and have as members of society. According to Anderson and Parker, culture is the total content of the physiosocial, biosocial, and psychosocial universe man has produced and the socially created mechanisms through which these social products operate. Mlinowski defines culture as the handiwork of man and the medium through which he achieves his ends. According to H.T. Mazumadar, culture is the sum total of human achievements, material as well as non-material, capable of transmission, sociologically, by tradition and communication vertically as well as horizontally. So to sum up all of those meaning that those various people define, culture is the sum total of human achievements or the total heritage of man which can be transmitted to men by communication and tradition. Culture, it is a way of life of the people in a certain geographical area. Culture is lifestyle and social pattern of a society being the direct consequence of the accumulated heritage of ages past distinguish and differentiate one community from another. Culture it is moral, intellectual, and spiritual discipline for advancement, in accordance with the norms and values based on accumulated heritage. It is a system of learned behavior shared by and transmitted among the members of the group. Culture is a collective heritage learned by individuals and passed from one generation to another. Now, let's talk about the characteristics of culture. Culture is learned behavior. Not all behavior is learned, but most of it is learned. Sometimes the terms conscious learning and unconscious learning are used to distinguish the learning. Some behavior is obvious and it is called overt behavior. Other behavior is less visible and it is called covert behavior. Culture is abstract. Culture exists in the minds or habits of the members of society. Culture is the shared ways of doing and thinking. We cannot see culture, as such we can only see human behavior. This behavior occurs in regular and patterned fashion. Culture is a pattern of learned behavior. Each person's behavior often depends upon some particular behavior of someone else. The point is that, as a general rule, behaviors are somewhat integrated or organized with related behaviors of other persons. Culture is the product of behavior. Cultural learnings are the products of behavior. As the person behaves, there occur changes in him. The experience of other people are impressed on one as he grows up, and also many of his traits and abilities have grown out of his own past behaviors. Culture includes attitudes, values, knowledge. It is easy to overestimate the uniqueness of one's own attitudes and ideas. When there is agreement with other people, it is largely unnoticed. But when there is a disagreement or difference, one is usually conscious of it. Your differences, however, may be cultural. Culture also includes material objects. Man's behavior results in creating objects. Man has invented something else and so on. All these things first existed in a state nature. Man merely modified their form, changed them from a state in which they were to the state in which he now uses them. Culture is shared by members of the society. Behavior are possessed not by one or a few persons, but usually by a large proportion. Persons may share some part of a culture unequally. Sometimes, the people share different aspects of culture. The point to our discussion is not that culture or any part of it is shared identically, but that it is shared by the members of the society to a sufficient extent. Culture is superorganic. It implies that culture is somehow superior to nature. The word superorganic is useful when it implies that what may be quite a different phenomenon from a cultural point of view. The same physical objects and physical characteristics, in other words, may constitute a variety of quite different cultural objects and cultural characteristics. Culture is pervasive. Culture is pervasive. It touches every aspect of life. The true pervasiveness of culture is manifested in two ways. First, culture provides an unquestioned context within which individual action and response take place. Not only emotional action but relational actions are governed by cultural norms. Second, culture pervades social activities and institutions. According to Ruth Benedict, a culture, like an individual, is a more or less consistent pattern of thought and action. With each culture, there come into being characteristic purposes not necessarily shared by other types of society. In obedience to these purposes, each person further consolidates its experience, and in proportion to the urgency of these drives, the heterogeneous items of behavior take more and more congruous shape. Culture is a way of life. Simple means the way of life of a people or their design for living. Historically derived system of explicit and implicit designs for living, which tends to be shared by all or specially designed members of a group. Explicit culture refers to similarities in word and action which can be directly observed. Implicit culture exists in abstract forms which are not quite obvious. Culture is a human product. Culture is not a force. Culture is a creation of society in interaction and depends for its existence upon the continuance of society. Culture does not do anything on its own. Culture, in short, is a human product. It is not independently endowed with life. Culture is idealistic. Culture embodies the ideas and norms of a group. It is sum total of the ideal patterns and norms of behavior of a group. It consists of the intellectual, artistic, and social ideals and institutions which the members of the society profess and to which they strive to conform. Culture is transmitted among the members of the society. The cultural ways are learned by persons from persons. Many of them are handed down by one's elders, by parents, teachers, and others. Other cultural behaviors are handed up to elders. Some of the transmission of culture is among contemporaries. Culture is continually changing. The inescapable attribute or special quality of culture is the fact of unending change. Some societies at some times change slowly. Other societies seem not to be changing at all. But they are changing, even though not obviously so. Culture is variable. Culture varies from society to society, group to group. Culture varies from group to group within the same society. There are subcultures within a culture. Cluster of patterns which are both related to general culture of the society and yet distinguishable from it are called subcultures. Culture is an integrated system. Culture possesses an order and system. It, its various parts are integrated with each other, and any new element which is introduced is also integrated. Language is the chief vehicle of culture. A specialized language pattern serves as a common bond to the members of a particular group or subculture. Culture is transmitted in a variety of ways. Language is one of the most important vehicles for perpetuating cultural patterns. Next we have is the functions of culture. So culture defines situations. Each culture has many subtle cues which define each situation. Each society has its insults and fighting words. The cues or hints which define situations appear in infinite variety. A person who moves from one society into another will spend many years misreading the cues. Culture defines attitudes, values, and goals. Attitudes, values, and goals are defined by the culture. Attitude are tendencies to feel and act in certain ways. Values are measures of goodness or desirability. For example, we value private property. Goals are those attainments which our values define as worthy. Culture defines myths, legends, and the supernatural. Myths and legends are an important part of every culture. They may inspire, reinforce effort and sacrifice, and bring comfort in bereavement. Myths and legends are powerful forces in a group's behavior. The nature of divine power and the important moral issues are defined by the culture. Culture provides behavior patterns. Culture imposes limits on human activities. The need for order calls forth another function of culture, that of so directing behavior. Disorderly behavior is restricted and orderly behavior is promoted. Social order cannot rest on the assumption that men will spontaneously behave in ways conducive to social harmony. So what is the relationship of culture and society? According to Ralph Linton, a society is an organized group of individuals. A culture is an organized group of learned responses. The individual is living organism capable of independent thought, feeling, and action, but with his independence limited and all his resources profoundly modified by contact with the society and culture in which he develops. So a society cannot exist apart from culture. So meaning they are both together. People carry and transmit culture, but they are not culture. No culture can exist except as it is embodied in a society of man. No society can operate without cultural directives. So culture is a very big part to play here in our society, for which it indicates our own behavior or what we are. Culture defines who we are, who we people. So that is for my reporting. Thank you everyone for listening, and I hope you have a good day.